folks. How has the tale been going so far? Now it's time to move on to the next part of this long episode, which I hope you've been really enjoying, because I've loved telling the story to you. And as the story progresses, I think you'll get a little more scared and a little closer to the denouement and a little more excited and curiosity driven. Just remember, curiosity killed the cat, so take care of yourselves as you listen to all these episodes that follow the first one. So let's get on with it. Though her belly spasmed with fear, she stood rooted to the spot like a rabbit hypnotized by a snake, unable to move, unable to make a sound, unable to tear her gaze away. She had no idea whether she stood there for a minute or an hour. But then Fardeen shifted in the bed behind her and murmured something incoherent, snapping her out of a trance. She threw him a quick glance over her shoulder, and when she looked back towards the tree, the figure was gone, swallowed by the night. Drenched in cold sweat, she went back to bed and snuggled against Fardeen's back, but just couldn't go back to sleep. When daylight washed away the ink of night, however, she convinced herself that she hadn't woken up at all. She simply had a nightmare that felt so real that she still remembered every detail. The juniper tree near the balcony swayed inoffensively in a gentle breeze, and she decided that its delicate branches couldn't possibly have supported anyone but a child, which the figure she remembered certainly hadn't been. Relieved and feeling just a little silly, she chose to say nothing to Fardeen, laughing away his concern at her tired eyes. "Then don't keep me up half the night with your ardor, husband," she teased, letting him grab her for a quick kiss. As dusk shrouded the sky, though, her dread returned. Wherever she walked, wherever she sat, she felt eyes crawling up her back, chilling her spine. What was wrong with her? This was the same mansion they had already lived in for nearly a month. True, she had felt a bit uneasy in its ancient embrace right from day one, but what she was feeling now went way beyond unease. The memory of the figure she had seen, dreamt of, sitting in the tree, overwhelmed her by the time they finished their evening meal. She wasn't surprised when Fardeen asked her if she was unwell. "You are so pale, Jaan," he observed a little anxiously, placing a hand on her forehead to check for fever. She told him she was just tired, and would he mind if she went to bed straight away? He said of course not, and wrapped a protective arm around her as they climbed up to their chamber, quite unaware that the servants were exchanging knowing looks behind their backs. Mehnaz's pallor and exhaustion were indicative, the staff was convinced, of some happy event in the offing. Fardeen's bride was probably pregnant. and just didn't know it yet. Mehnaz was so tired that she slipped into a dreamless sleep the moment her head touched the pillow, and didn't know that Fardeen sat and watched her for a while, his eyes worried. He climbed into bed beside her at last and read for an hour or so before turning off the bedside lamp and relaxing into sleep. It must have been a couple hours past midnight, Mehnaz surmised when she shared the bizarre experience years later with Daria, her daughter, and my friend's mother. As though shaken by some unseen hand, she jerked awake and bolted upright in bed. Her heart was hammering in her chest. Her mouth was as dry as sandpaper, and she was hyperventilating as if she had run for a mile. She felt Fardeen's warm body next to her, but she couldn't look at him. Not when her attention was caught like a butterfly and pinned to the balcony beyond, where she had imagined or dreamt herself standing last night. The space was dark, illuminated only by starlight. The two tall lanterns the servants always left glowing there appeared to have gone out. Something that had never happened before. Since the mansion predated electricity by a century and had not been used by the family in decades, only a half-hearted effort had been made to electrify just a couple of bedchambers, including theirs, and the smaller dining room and sitting rooms. The remaining spaces, including corridors and balconies, were illuminated by candelabras or lanterns. Mehnaz didn't get out of bed this time, frozen in place by a nameless fear that locked her throat, preventing her from even whimpering. Slowly, like a pair of reluctant soldiers on a lost battlefield, her eyes crept across the silent, dark balcony, unspoken prayers tangling with her breath. And there, inside the middle arch, perched on the narrow sill like a crow, was the figure she had seen, or maybe dreamt of, last night, sitting in the juniper tree. The sill of the arch was barely broad enough for a cat, she knew, and yet there it was, an unnaturally elongated but decidedly female form, crouched like an animal ready to spring, vibrating on the cusp of explosive energy. A sort of cowl shielded the woman's face, but menace radiated off her like a miasma. An assassin, thought Mehnaz incoherently, the fear like acid in her lungs. An assassin sent by some rival political group or business house. For Fardeen's father didn't just have the Shah's ear. He was also an entrepreneur with the Midas touch. As much admired in certain quarters as he was detested in others. Since they couldn't get past his security, they planned to kill his only son and heir. Even as the thought formed, however, she knew she was just clutching at straws to retain her sense of reality. The woman, balanced on that impossibly thin ledge, was no assassin. She was something far, far worse. Mehnaz felt it in her bones, in her gut. And she hadn't come for Fardeen. She had come for his bride. In that instant, the woman inside the arch threw up her head, letting the cowl fall away, liberating her long tangled hair and baring her teeth in a jeer. Teeth that looked like rusted, curved miniature daggers inside a mouth as dark as the heart of hell, set in a face culled out of nightmares. The bones of that face were knitted together like crisscrossed knives. Under reddish skin scored with deep furrows and seams. In the transparent starlight, Mehnaz should not have been able to see that hideous countenance with such clarity, but there was a darkness radiating from the creature that perversely made every horrid feature painfully visible to her staring eyes. Eyes held captive. Now, by those of the female on the ledge. Scarlet embers that burnt on both sides of a snub, crooked nose. A nose that looked as though it had been haphazardly smashed into the middle of that dreadful face as an afterthought, made of something other than flesh. The woman, or whatever she was, unfolded to her feet, even as Mehnaz watched entranced. She stood effortlessly balanced on the narrow ledge, her fiery gaze never straying from the young woman's face. That was when Mehnaz realized that what she had taken to be a dark robe was just a piece of the night. The creature, not an assassin, not even human, had pulled around herself like a deception. Within that murk, the demons, it had to be a demon of some sort, the demon's body gleamed dark on dark, abnormally long, skeletal, and as wrinkled and crumpled as the face itself. Mehnaz could see breasts like ugly, flaccid balloons hanging from that bony chest, dried up barren udders that had never plumped up with milk, never nursed a baby. The elongated legs ended in claw-like feet that gripped the sill like the talons of a vulture, and the thin arms ended in a pair of ugly hands that reached like an ape's halfway down its shins. The creature sniggered, a horrible, dry, raspy sound, and then snarled softly. And Mehnaz actually felt her hair stand on end, crackling with static, as the demonic thing on the ledge appeared to gather itself for a lunge. Mehnaz's throat unlocked itself and she screamed, releasing the mounting panic and terror like a cannonball that almost shook the rafters. Once started, she couldn't stop and barely registered when Fardeen woke up with a startled shout, blinking in confusion before reaching out and gathering her clothes, demanding what was wrong, attempting unsuccessfully to calm her down. She continued to scream and cry and shudder, pointing at the demoness in the balcony and whimpering, "Make her go away! Don't let her get to me!" "But there is nobody there, Jaan," Fardeen tried to tell her, apparently unable to see the creature even as it crouched, grinning and growling under the arch, its scarlet eyes moving between the man and the hysterical woman in his arms. "You had a nightmare, I think. A bad one. You're awake now. It's over. Hush, my love, hush." Servants came running from the adjacent wing, having heard the demented screaming floating out into the quiet night, and were knocking on the door, asking if all was well. Mehnaz heard Fardeen calling out reassurances, but her frightened gaze never left the monstrous form outside. As the commotion grew, the hag-like thing gave her one last leering grin before falling backwards over the ledge and simply dissolving into the night. As you can imagine, nobody in the household got much sleep after that. And rather than starting the return journey after a leisurely breakfast as they had planned, an anxious Fardeen bundled his pale, subdued wife into their limousine barely an hour after dawn, leaving the servants to finish the packing and follow in the other two vehicles. They barely stopped along the way except to quickly bite into hastily prepared sandwiches and stretch their legs. They managed to get back home in less than 10 hours. Mehnaz's drawn features were taken note of by her in-laws, and Fardeen gave them a terse explanation once he'd put his wife to bed. His worried mother set up a house call by the family physician, who showed up the next day to examine the young woman. To the family's delight, he informed them that Mehnaz was expecting. The Mahe-Asal had apparently done the trick. In less than 8 months from that day, Fardeen's parents would be holding their first grandchild in their arms. Nothing was wrong with Mehnaz, the doctor assured them. She was only undergoing some hormonal changes that were inducing a bit of emotional turmoil, resulting in the vivid nightmares. All she needed was rest, reassurance, and pampering, and she would be right as rain soon enough. The wondrous news pulled Mehnaz out of the well of fear she had fallen into, and gradually convinced her that she simply had a frightening dream, or that her imagination had twisted a patchwork of shadows into the hellish figure. Had it been real, wouldn't Fardeen have seen it too? Obviously, pregnancy had turned her fanciful, as it did many other women. The next few weeks were happy and secure, and even morning sickness couldn't keep the smile off her face. And then, in the last week of her first trimester, it happened again. Luckily, Fardeen had just come home after a week of absence on some outstation duty and was sleeping next to her. She remained convinced forever afterwards that it was only his presence that saved her life that night. As had happened twice before, something woke her up, yanking her out of deep sleep. Her heart was galloping in her chest like a mad stallion. She was soaked in perspiration even on that pleasant autumn night, and yet was shivering violently, her hands and feet cold as ice. The tall French windows on her side, with their silk and lace curtains, stood open, just the way she had left them, and the night lamp cast a warm pink glow in the far corner of the big room. Slowly, she sat up in bed, instinctively clasping the arm Fardeen had flung across her in sleep. Everything seemed fine. And yet, there was someone else in the room with them. She knew that in her gut and felt her blood freeze as waves of malevolence surged through the air towards her. Oh no, oh no, oh no. She moaned wordlessly as her breath hitched and stumbled, and her eyes, wide with fear and foreknowledge, turned of their own volition towards the windows on Fardeen's side of the bed. Just inside the room, wrapped in the length of darkness she seemed to carry with her, stood the demoness she had seen in their ancestral mansion on 2 successive nights. Wildly tangled, long black hair, skeletal body with its flaccid breasts, ghastly wrinkled face grinning at her with a mouth full of rusted, daggered teeth, red eyes gleaming with malice and hunger. The nightmare had come alive again, And this time it wasn't sitting in a tree or perched on a balcony. It was right there in the same room with her. Transfixed with fright, Mehnaz watched the creature's ember eyes travel from her face to her still flat belly. At 12 weeks, her pregnancy was undetectable to any but a midwife's eye. But she knew without a doubt that the hideous hag knew, that she had known the very first night she had watched Mehnaz from the tree in the garden. That was why she had come, because she wanted, coveted the new life blooming in the young woman's womb. Mehnaz's terrified gaze alighted on the apparition's shoulder, noting that a shapeless bag hung from it, made of what looked like skin. Human skin. Why had the creature brought that bag with her this time? It hadn't been there before. Even in a petrified state, Mehnaz was certain of that. As the demoness growled softly and took a step towards the bed, Mehnaz tried to scream, only to find that her vocal cords were paralyzed with fright. Desperate, she dug her nails viciously into her husband's arm and then pinched him hard for good measure. Fardeen yowled with pain and woke up cursing. Snatching his arm to rub at his abused skin. Even as he mumbled incoherent questions, Mehnaz saw the horrendous creature bare its teeth and snarl with frustration, snapping her out of her daze. The girl began screaming, pointing at the creature and clinging so hard to Fardeen's neck that she nearly strangled him. Just like last time, though, her husband could see nothing but the wide open windows, even as the demoness, witch, whatever she was, fell out of them backwards, dissolving into the darkness. Her extremely worried in-laws called in the family doctor again, who dismissed Mehnaz's experience as another hormone-induced nightmare and prescribed some tonics. Fardeen's mother, however, could see the lingering terror in her young daughter-in-law's eyes and found herself unwilling to dismiss the incident as a pregnant woman's imagination. So, she sent for the old midwife, Zohra, who'd helped her birth her own 3 children. Retired now, but still spry and alert. There were some things Nazneen believed that only women could understand about a mother-to-be, even if men were the ones who held medical degrees. Zohra pursed her lips after hearing the weird tale, and both Nazneen and Mehnaz saw the brief flicker of fear and incredulity in her still sharp brown eyes. For several minutes, the woman sat holding Mehnaz's wrists, and staring intently at her face, as though attempting to read her heart and her mind. All she said, though, was, "Don't ever leave the girl alone at night, Nazbano. Not even once. All right? If your son is not at home, and I know that he is often absent when Asha needs him elsewhere, sleep with her yourself, or get your sister-in-law to do so. Not your daughters, you understand? Nor any other young woman who is still fertile. If this is what I think it is, but here, in this house, in these times, maybe I'm wrong, and perhaps this is just a recurrent nightmare, as that Hakim of yours says," she muttered, using the Farsi word for doctor. "We shall see. But if this happens again, even once more, go speak with your mother-in-law. Take the girl along and let her describe these dreams, visions, whatever they are, directly to Arshia Bano. She might know what to do, since she herself... Anyway, that is the only advice I can offer." "My mother-in-law," Nazneen echoed, surprised and puzzled. "But she is away visiting her daughter in another city, and I know she is in Shahryar," the old woman said testily. "Which is what, a 2-hour journey by that fancy new car of yours? Yes? If Mehnaz cannot travel, request Arshia Bano to come back. Write to her or something. But if this goes on, she might be the only person who can help the girl and the babe in her belly." Listening intently, Mehnaz caught the hesitation before the word help. What the woman had meant to say was save, but she had chosen tact over truth. Mehnaz was certain of that and felt fear fill her throat like bile. Nazneen tried her best to get the midwife to tell them more about her suspicions, but the old lady wouldn't say another word. A deeply worried Nazneen proceeded to ensure that her daughter-in-law was never left alone after dark, moving into Mehnaz's room when her son was away, or requesting her sister-in-law, theirs was a joint family, or the trusted old nanny of her children, to step in when she couldn't. The men were all rather puzzled by this new arrangement, but shrugged it away as some female pregnancy ritual. All right, folks, this is where I'm leaving you today, perched on the pinnacle of dreadful curiosity and craving the denouement as ardently as a traveler lost in the desert craves water. I'll be waiting for you with a canteen full of the cool stuff next time we meet. So, come back on the third Friday of this month and find out what happened to the beleaguered Mehnaz and her baby. And in the meanwhile, don't forget to like, subscribe and share the contents of this channel, this episode, all the previous episodes with everyone you can think of, friends, family, acquaintances, students, whoever, and make sure that they also enjoy this dreadfully delightful Halloween tale, as well as the ones I've already told you before and which many of you seem to have liked a lot. So, take care of yourself, have a good fortnight ahead, and come back soon after Halloween so that we may finish this really scary and spooky tale together. And once again, let me assure you, this is a true story. It's just that I'm telling it in my own way, as I always do. So, good night, take care, and I'll see you soon. Bye.